All right, it's showtime, baby. Happy Friday, everyone. Today's a special day. Today we're talking about raising millions of dollars for your land business, why it's important, how to do it, how I've done it, how you can do it, how a lot of others have done it, all the different routes you have available to actually go and do this, right? There's not just one path or one fundraising route. So we're really going to cover the full gamut here today. Now, you guys know I like to ramble, so we're going to try to be concise. I do have a hard stop at 10 a.m. PST, so we've got exactly an hour here. This is a big topic to unpack. We're going to do our best to do it in one session, but we'll see. We'll see what we can get away with. I've got a golf date with the team of Leah coaches and Justin, who's our client specialist. We're all going golfing today up in North County, which is very exciting. North County, San Diego. I'm a terrible golfer myself, so we'll see how things go. But it's always a good time to spend a couple hours outside with your friends. All right, guys. Well, hope everyone's having a great Friday. If you guys have questions while we're going through this, feel free to put them in the chat. If you guys like some of the fire, in quotes, as the millennials say, while I'm going through this, let me know, right? These are mono dialogue conversations. I'm always just talking to myself here. So if you guys like any of this stuff, throw an emoji, give me a heart, give me something to let me know you're listening. This is actually helpful. All right, guys. Well, cool. Like I said, we won't dilly-dally today. We're going to get into it, okay? So let's talk about what I call the capital equation, right? You know, I like to think about the land business kind of as just like this weird machine. And what happens is we go and put money on one side of the machine, and it's a force multiplier. So on the other end of the machine, more money spits out, right? Every business is going to be a little bit different. Some people are going to see 500% cash on cash returns annually. Some people see 300% cash on cash. It just depends on the person in the business. So if that's the case, right, then it begs the question of, well, how do we grow? Well, one, you can make the machine more efficient, and I'm a big believer of that, right? So we coach people on going from being a land investor to a land entrepreneur. Part of that means building a system that's more efficient, bringing people in to help run it, creating clear roles in the business. But things can only become so efficient, right? The internal combustion engine inside of your car, they can only become so efficient, right? There's limits to all systems in terms of how efficient we can make them. So then the next lever, which is going to be more impactful, is how much money can we get into that machine, right? And so first, yes, we want to make a machine that's efficient, right? You don't want to have, I see people with these hodgepodge, horribly pieced together businesses with teams that make no sense, shit's all over the place. And they're like, I'm going to go raise some money. And say, well, first, let's make sure you have a good foundation. Then we're going to put as much money as we can into it. So a good way to look at like, how much am I going to make this year? You could just simply say, well, how much capital am I going to put into the machine this year? And so it's actually one of my favorite metrics to track is like monthly, quarterly, annually. How much have we done in new acquisitions and new purchases? So in our business, it changes month to month, but from last year to this year, we typically float around $300,000 to $500,000 a month of new acquisitions. And so that gives me a pretty steady read on how we're going to grow. And so if I wanted to grow my land business, yes, I could make it a little bit more efficient, but really I need to go from $500K a month of new acquisitions to $1 million a month of new acquisitions. That's going to be a pretty easy way to double our business, right? Okay, so we got the kind of basic primer out of the way. Now, this is the problem for most land investors. Assuming you've pieced together the skills, okay, let's assume that you know how to do the basic things. You've assembled a team. Like we're going to assume that you're not a total novice. You figured out the basics. For most land investors, I'm shocked. There's people that are so good at going and generating deals. They're just killers across the board in their business, but they don't know how to raise money, or they don't want to raise money. Maybe there's a little bit of like discomfort there. You know, I think it's a bit taboo to go ask for money. And so I find that like there's folks that I know personally that are doing millions of dollars a year in sales in their business. And yet they're giving away half of that or 40% of that to different kinds of funders, right? And it doesn't just have to be joint venture. It could be really expensive debt or what have you. Now, I've heard stories of people going and doing deals that have, you know, a $400,000 spread, and that investor only walks away with like $100,000. Crazy shit like that. And what happens is I just don't think people are thinking for themselves, or maybe it's just the 4-minute mile syndrome. They don't realize how much money is out there, right? One of the things that we're going to talk about here today is the fact that I never was in a business prior to this where raising money was such a backbone of what we do, but quickly you have to realize that raising money is essential in this business. What I learned is that there's substantially more money out there than there is opportunity, an absurd amount. If you want to feel and start to understand how abundant the world is, go start knocking on rich people's doors and start having conversations about what you're doing, and you realize there is more money than you could ever deploy. I mean, there's too much money. There's really not enough opportunities. And so if you are the one that can create a business that can reliably and systematically go and create new opportunities, you have all of the leverage. Finding money should be a cinch. And in fact, it is a cinch. People just have conditioning around that, or I don't know, whatever it is, limiting beliefs. But you need to start to reframe the fact that I'm an opportunity creator. We don't come along every day. Opportunity creators are very rare. People want to allocate capital to opportunity creators, okay? Now, let's say you come into this business and you got a crap load of money. We see this all the time, right? You waltz into this business, you exited a previous business, or you got another business that spits out cash flow and you've got money. The two kind of cardinal sins I see these people make, and they're definitely not like the majority, but they are the minority, and they come up pretty often. We see this a lot for folks that want to join Leah. Successful somewhere else, have money. Okay, what should I do? Well, the first problem, which is slightly tangential that I see, is they try to build a team right off the rip. Bad idea. If you don't know how to do the things yourself, do not start hiring a team. Totally different video, different day. That's worth noting. The second thing is do not fund your own deals. I'm a big believer that unless it's a home run, slam dunk, crazy, ridiculous deal that you would hate to give up any equity on or any points on, don't fund the deal yourself. Because your capital is going to go further by building a team and by scaling your marketing than it ever is going to go and closing on deals for acquisitions. All right, so redirect the capital internally, systems, software stack, team, marketing. You'll grow way faster that way, right? If you've got boatloads of money, I can tell you that if you're doing 10,000 mailers a month right now and you're funding your own deals, I could grow your business faster by bringing outside capital in and taking it from 10,000 mailers a month to 50,000 mailers a month or 100,000 mailers a month. And we're going to fund all those deals outside. And we're going to have to pay for the team associated to support that level of marketing. You will grow. I can't even draw a comparison off the top of my head. It's crazy how much faster you'd grow. So the conundrum here is that a lot of us want to keep the whole pie to ourselves. I think I said this on a YouTube video. It's like, imagine that you could have a crumb of a pizza, but you can have that whole crumb to yourself, and that feels amazing because it's 100% ownership. That's my crumb. Or I could say, yo, I got this extra large pizza here. Do you want a slice? Even though as a percentage you're getting less, that slice is substantially larger and more satiating than that little crumb is. I don't know how very many people in this business could afford to float a team, to float marketing, to float a software stack, and shell out 500 grand a month for new acquisitions when we're expecting those deals to turn over in 2, 3, 4, 5 months. That seems impossible. Seems really, really unrealistic. The other thing is that everyone's so concerned with how the market's changed. And if you've been land investing since 2020, 2021, you remember the good old days, right? You put a deal up. Sometimes it's gone in a few hours, a few minutes. Sometimes it's gone in a few days. I mean, just stuff would just fly off the MLS. And those were the good old days. That was awesome. It's not how the land business is meant to be run. That's just typically not how it goes. Land is super illiquid. We got to just kind of come to accept that. And so Q4 of last year, things start to soften a little bit, which is natural. It wasn't like this was like this huge step back. It was just relative to what we were used to. Things started to soften. And people started hitting the panic button, right? And why was that? Well, it's because they had these deals in inventory that weren't bad deals, but they had bad capital funding those deals. And so they had capital that had really intense timelines on them. They had joint venture funds that within 6 months or 3 months or whatever it's going to be, they're not going to make anything on it. And so I saw multiple people, big name land investors, get out of the business because they couldn't float the cost of their team anymore, because these deals they were supposed to make money on went sideways or took longer than expected, and they got like nothing on the deal, right? But if you've got good enough capital and you got good enough terms, does it really matter to you if a deal takes 6 months opposed to 3 months? Not really. I mean, like ideally, we always want to compound our capital faster, but if I'm paying 12% interest over a 12-month period, I mean, 3 to 6 months, yeah, I feel it a little bit, but it's not a big deal. Now, if you are using a very aggressive joint venture funder that has these narrow timelines, yeah, you're fucked. You're absolutely screwed. And so, like, you could even make an argument too, if you are doing that, you're going to have to really take your properties down in price. So let's say let's say in this example with the private money that's debt based over a 12-month period. Let's say, we are always going to want to sell under market. Let's say I can sell at 90% of market value, and I can do that in 6 months. And let's say that 10%, well, let's say relative to joint venture that I have to sell within less than 6 months, I have to sell it at 70%, let's say hypothetically. So we've got a 20% delta between those two. That 20% is going to be substantially more than the few additional percentage points we're going to pay on that capital, right? And so you can actually make more on your deals by being slightly patient, right? If I've got right now, I think we have almost 100 properties in inventory. I don't really care how long some of these take. I mean, like once you have that many properties in inventory, it's like every week, every month, deals are falling. If you got cheap enough vehicles to fund them, this doesn't really matter that much. Now, I'm not saying we should get here and try to maximize value on every deal. We still have to offer a deal to the next person that comes along to sell it in a reasonable amount of time. But I do see people that are having to fire sale their properties to meet these really tight windows for funding, right? Something that's just worth noting. So the takeaway here, don't fund your own deals, right? I don't care if you're Daddy Warbucks, you've got millions. Make sure that your money is going towards building your team, scaling your marketing, software stack. Again, there are situations where there are some one-off deals that make sense to fund. I'll tell you guys a quick story. There was a fund for one of our first students. I've shared this before, but I think it's worth noting. There was a deal that came along for one of our first students. Funnily enough, it was a deal that I initially passed up on. I don't know how that missed my radar. It just did. It was in a portfolio of deals. There was one really good deal within this portfolio. I forget the exact math, but I think he bought it for $14,000 or $15,000, and then sold it for $140,000 or $145,000 in like a week. Cool. I'm not trying to give up any equity on that, right? If you've got multiple 5 figures, multiple 6 figures in your bank account, going and closing on a $14,000 or $15,000 deal is no biggie. What happens though is when you're the person that's trying to fund all your acquisitions, that's where things get a little bit slippery. So there will be once a quarter, once a year, whatever it is, depending on how much marketing you're sending out, there will be deals that come into your pipeline that are just stupid, silly, crazy good. And you should probably fund those yourself if you're just using joint venture. Now, if we've got debt, it doesn't really matter as much, okay? All right, guys, let's get into the actual funding strategies. If this is helpful thus far, put it in the chat. Let me know. Let's talk about the different funding strategies. So what I'm going to list out here is kind of like the hierarchy, right? Where most people start, what people are going to do beyond that, step. Okay, we're going to kind of give you the natural roadmap for most land investors. So I'll tell you how to find all of these capital stacks. We'll talk about more of that at the end, so make sure you stay till the end. But let me give you a little nitty gritty here, okay? Most of you guys are going to be pretty familiar with what we call public JV. That's joint venture money. If you guys aren't familiar, joint venture essentially means that someone is coming along as the money partner. You're the operator. The money partner is going to fund the purchase price, the closing costs, and they're going to take equity in the deal. It's different for every money partner. It might be 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, 80-20. A lot of people use time-based or waterfall splits. So the longer the property sits, the more it kind of starts to decay in terms of that percentage split. Now, these are really cool because there's the public JV. There's essentially businesses out there that are built around funding land investors deals. So they're really easy to find. They're typically very responsive. They do this professionally. They typically have a really big sample size of previous deals that they've done. So they can give you a ton of insight. A lot of times they can say, oh, we've actually done a deal here, so this is what we were thinking, or this is a yes because of this, or a no because of this. So typically with these public joint venture groups, you learn a ton, right? You learn a ton. They're very responsive. They're really easy to work with. And they're not going to look at you in terms of your land investing track record, unless you've done some crazy shit, like done some shady stuff. But they're not going to look at you in terms of your joint venture track record or your deal track record. They're looking at it in terms of the deal that you're bringing to the table, right? So they're underwriting the deal, not you. And that's cool because when you're a brand spanking new land investor, you have no track record. Why would anyone trust you with any money? It seems crazy. The deal will be your track record. The deal will be your resume. So you go and find good enough deals, they'll take it on. Now, of course, there's some limitations here. So there's going to be a floor. It's different for every joint venture funder. Don't go send them your piddly squat little $10,000, $5,000 purchases. They don't want that, right? They're looking for deals where they can go deploy a good chunk of capital. They can get at least 100% return on the deal in total. And ideally, they can turn it under 6 months. It's pretty much everyone's rule of thumb for joint venture. It's going to be deal by deal, case by case. So I don't want you to think that this is just like the end all be all. I get so many questions where Sumner's like, people are like, Sumner, why do they deny this deal? I'm like, I don't know. They underwrite each deal independently. There's not like this like rule book that they follow to a T. Every deal is going to be different. So it's not like, hey, you got a deal you can buy at 10,000 and sell at 30,000. They might do that. You got a deal you can buy at 10,000 and sell at 22,000. They might not do that. Just depends. So these people are easy to find. You can literally just start Googling. You'll start finding them. Look in Facebook groups. Look inside Discord groups. Like they're all over. They're not very, very difficult to find. You don't need a track record. They're very responsive. They'll cover the purchase price, closing costs. You'll cover obviously the marketing costs and the dispo costs and all that stuff. You guys will split gross profit. So you guys sell a deal after closing costs on the acquisition and dispo side, realtor fees, if there are any, you guys will split that. This is literally what I built my business on. It's what so many other land investors have built their business on. You can scale this model to low 7 figures, multiple 6 figures. I think frankly, if you're at that scale, it's probably in your best interest to start looking at other options. I know many folks that just haven't really thought outside the box that are making 7 figures or so doing this model. So it certainly works. The cool thing about this is these people typically have a lot of money. So while they are going to have a floor for the deals they want to do and a ceiling, they're typically not going to want to do $250,000 plus flips. So it's just harder to move. You could go and do millions of dollars of deals with them a year. They usually have a lot of liquidity, but they are going to have limits on deal by deal basis because it's just a different model, right? Okay, so that's step number one. You should be able to find that in a sense. It's really not too difficult. I don't even think I need to go and explain how to find that. Just use the internet, right? Number two is what I call private joint venture. This is where things start to get exciting because with a public joint venture firm, you have no leverage, right? They're getting dozens of deals sent to them a day or a week. You're just kind of a cog in a machine. So if you try to be the squeaky wheel, you're like, hey, give me more. They're going to be like, no, get out of here, right? You have no leverage in that situation. You're just one of many land investors sending them deals. Private JVs where things start to get interesting, right? So you start networking, friends, family, you start sharing on social media, talking to people at dinners, whatever it may be. Usually the first stepping stone to getting someone to invest with you, in my opinion, especially if you're a new land investor, is what I call private joint venture. So you're going to set up a joint venture arrangement with them, but the terms are going to be way more favorable because you've got all the leverage, right? The other thing was that with a public JV, there's all these like norms and expectations that have been set in the land investing space. None of that exists with private money. So you could say we do 90-10 splits. We do 95-5 splits. They have no context, right? If you can outperform 10% a year and they're backed by the collateral of an asset, people are going to love you forever. Like that, there's not very a high bar to exceed, but for other land investors or public joint venture firms, there's a high bar to kind of cross over. They have a lot more context in this business. And so this is typically like if I was a new land investor, this is how I'd always start off their arrangement, right? This is not how I'm going to want to do all of my deals, but this is how we get someone kind of in our world in a very safe manner. We can hold title together. It's going to go through a title company. They know exactly the deal that it's going through. They can have exposure on the deals that we're doing. There's no like, what deal are you doing? They got to DD it and vet it themselves. And they're going to get a lot more upside than they would in a debt model, right? So if the deal does really well, they have some skin in the game, so they can do really well, right? I think that if you can, however you guys want to do this math, if you can reliably make a private JVer about 7 to 10% per deal they do, that's awesome. Because compounded over a year, they can do multiple deals with you. They can get a really, really, really big return that just can't find really anywhere else. Now, a couple of the bottlenecks with public and private JV is going to be when it comes to owner financing sales, right? Owner financing makes up a big part of what we do in this business. I love owner financing. With public JVers, they're not going to want to hold notes pretty much ever. With private JVers, you want to talk about this beforehand, kind of get their temperature on it. It's going to be case by case. It depends on how quickly they can get their basis back. My recommendation to you is sell everything on a deed of trust and sell those notes if you have to, right? That's going to be your best route. So if you get a note and it sells quicker than a cash sale and it sells for more, you could say, hey, JV, or do you want to hold this? Most times they're going to say no, because it's more efficient for them to turn their capital more times with you. And so you guys can sell that note, 70, 80% of the note's value. That's a really cool way you can do it at the closing table and recoup a ton of capital back into your pockets and the JVers pockets. So I would always include owner finance terms. I would just make sure that you set the expectation on the front end and say, like, if we do get an owner finance offer, do you want to sell them? Do you not want to sell them? With other funding strategies, we can get a little more creative with how we go about things. Okay. All right. So now we're starting to move into the point where, hey, you've done a couple dozen deals. You've got a good track record. You know what you're doing. You've been in the business for probably coming up on a year now. Now we start looking into what I call hard money. This is going to be like private hard money. You're not going to go call up your local hard money lender, although you could. Most of them just don't really understand land, frankly. So it's like too much of a weird conversation. I find that going to people that are like one layer removed from real estate, that aren't like hardcore real estate investors themselves, can lend really well. So like they understand investing. They understand what the words cash on cash return or IRR mean. That's really helpful. But if someone's like a nitty gritty hardcore investor, usually there's like an opportunity cost conundrum where they can just do better things with their money elsewhere. So this is what I call hard money. This is typically what we're going to do. We're going to take a private JV and we're going to say, hey, you know what? We're closing out our JV model. We're moving more to a deal-based, debt-based funding model. That's a mouthful. So instead of them saying, hey, I'm going to get 30% of the deal or 20% or 10% of the deal, we're going to say, hey, we're going to take your money. You're going to put a promissory note together. You're going to look at the deal. You're still going to underwrite the deal. So if you don't like the deal, you won't lend on it. But if you like the deal, you will lend to us 10%, 12%, 15%, 18% a year, whatever it may be. Money's going to be out for no longer than a year, but we have the option to renew. Ideally, they should fund 100% of the purchase price, so like 105% of the purchase price, so you can cover closing costs. Yeah, and that's pretty much the setup, right? So now you're taking whatever the amount of debt, depending on when you sell it. Some of these hard money lenders or some public hard money lenders out there that do things a little different. They'll want you to fund 10% of the acquisition. They have like an origination fee. Look, you're going to pay a price for taking convenience. So if you are lazy and you just go search online hard money lender, these people will shaft you a little bit more. Instead, if you go and create your own connections, your own network, you'll have a lot more say in terms of how you create those terms. So for like private hard money, people that aren't actually doing this as a business, we get 100%, typically 12 to 15% annualized over a year. And we usually ask for a little bit of a bump on that purchase price to cover closing costs and all that stuff. Okay. Hope that makes sense thus far. Now, you're typically not going to start here, although you can. Depends on like if you have good connection or rapport with these people, you can start there. But if they're a stranger, I think starting them with private JV is just a lot safer for everyone involved. In that hard money situation, you can put them in a first lien position. So they are, heaven forbid, something bad happens. There can be a little bit of recourse here. Now, you might be saying, Sumner, what's the difference between that and like just getting like an overarching promissory note in your business? Well, this is still going to be lending per the deal, right? So if I send them a deal, it's a buy for 100, sell for 130. They're going to be like, dude, this sucks. I'm not going to lend on this. Send them a deal, it's a buy for 100, sell for 200, 300, 400. Like, damn, that's awesome. Good for you. So they want to see that the thing that they're going to have a first lien position on is a decent asset. So this is like the difference with if I just go and raise $500,000 as a blanket promissory note for my business, they might not have any exposure in terms of what we're buying. That can be a little bit concerning for them, right? And so like it's just a slow graduation where you're building trust. You go public JV, private JV, hard money, and you just kind of stair-stepping your way up the rung. That brings us to the next point. It's what I call long-term notes. Now, what's cool about hard money lending is it's real-time need-based lending. Hey, I have this deal. It's a $50,000 purchase. I need lending on it right now. As we move into this long-term note-based lending, it becomes a little trickier because you have to be able to forecast your capital needs. So if I go and raise $1 million, I don't know how to deploy it. I don't know. I don't have enough deals. I can't send enough marketing. People leave my team. I'm SOL because I got to pay interest on that no matter what. So this is not a beginner strategy at all. And you need a serious track record to have the ability to forecast your capital needs. Also, people probably aren't going to lend to you unless you do have a great track record, right? So all along, we'll touch on this deeper into the show, but all along this journey, you need to be documenting your KPIs, building track records, case studies, all that stuff, because it's going to be the backbone of getting capital in your business, right? So long-term notes might look like, hey, last year in acquisitions, we used, I don't know, $2 million total for new purchases. I think that we can turn our capital hypothetically 4 times in 1 year. So I'm going to raise $500,000. I'm going to deploy it 4 times in the next year. That's going to bring us to $2 million in total acquisitions off of that $500,000 raise. And you might have that for 12 months, 24 months, whatever it may be. And you could do interest payments quarterly, monthly, annually at the end of the commitment, whatever you want to do. 12 months is a little tricky because you're going to have to stop your acquisitions or just be really good at running the books and making sure that you've got the money in place. So I think typically like something that's closer to 2 years is going to work out a little bit better. It gives you a lot more runway to go and deploy the capital, and it gives you a bit of a buffer on the end because you definitely would want to be careful with that. Now, this is not a strategy that I recommend for everyone. You got to really know what you're doing, be able to forecast. Now, what's cool is you could use this capital not just for acquisitions. You could use it for marketing. You could use it across the board inside your business to help it grow. Typically here, you're going to be paying, I don't know, again, 12 to 20%, depends on the arrangement. Annually, I would probably fight for annual interest payments or quarterly interest payments, or you could defer all of them to the end, just depends on the arrangement. Yeah, I mean, if we talk about like the efficiency of your system, like if you were trying to raise this level of money and you're trying to do it through this vehicle, there should be not a shadow of a doubt that your system isn't perfect in terms of the team that you have, the system that you built, the processes. If there's any slack in that system, you're focusing on the wrong problem, right? Go create that more efficient business first, that more efficient system. There was something I was going to say on this that I'm totally blanking. Yeah, let's talk about collateral, right? So on these, you could do an unsecured promissory note, or you could do a secured promissory note. It just depends on the arrangement, right? Some people are going to be cool with unsecured because they really trust you, they know you, all that stuff. Some people are going to want the level of security. What you can lend against that I think is relatively straightforward is if you've built up a note portfolio, you could use that as collateral. One of the cool things that Dennis was talking about in some previous videos on the YouTube channel was like keeping one out of every 5 deals and trying to land bank on them, and then using that as collateral for your lending as well. So imagine you have a deal that you bought for $30,000, but it's really worth $100,000. You can get lending at that $100,000 price. That's pretty cool. I mean, they're probably going to lend at some kind of discount rate relative to that, but you're going to use that as the value, and that thing's going to continue to appreciate over time. So I think it's a kind of a cool model, like this land banking, one out of every 4 or 5 deals. I think a lot of land investors or real estate investors in general that are in a flipping business, one of the regrets that they'll tell you is, shit, I really wish I just kept more deals. That seems to be the common response for real estate investors in general. And I don't think it's any different in land. Every year, we're going to come across properties that could have huge long-term outcomes because they're in the right market, they have the right zoning, the right location in a market. Like there's something there. And so keeping your eyes open to that. And then you could go and put that into your business, and you could actually get lending against that pretty much immediately. And so you can pull your capital out and continue to deploy it. Kind of an interesting strategy. Now, again, all of this is kind of working up to this crescendo of building trust. So if someone's going to give you money on a long-term promissory note, they've probably gone through a few cycles with you: public JV, private JV, and then hard money lending. So they really know you at this point. It's going to be really hard to take a stranger off the street and convince them to give you a big lump sum of money, unless you've got a phenomenal track record and you've got a lot of people that can vouch for you. I don't know, just my 2 cents. You're probably also going to have to pay a premium in terms of interest based off of any lack of trust. So the more trust that's there, you can get better terms of the money, opposed to maybe paying close to 20% with a stranger or something like that. Okay, let's talk about bank financing. Bank financing is an interesting one. It does not work everywhere. It doesn't work for every kind of property. In my opinion, I think it works best for value add deals that we're going to go and subdivide or entitle or what have you. Pretty much there's no money out there that's going to be cheaper in most cases than bank financing. Like it's pretty hard for anyone to compete with the interest rates that banks can lend on. The problem is there's also a ton of complexity. They're really slow going. They can be hard to find. They can be difficult to work with. They can have strict requirements. They're going to need your kind of personal finances in clean order. So if you don't make a lot of money, or you just got some weird shadiness in your background, or not shadiness, but some stuff that's less than ideal, they're going to make it really difficult for you. They want to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. So typical rule of thumb for these deals that you're going to use bank financing on, what I've seen is you typically have to be in markets where buying land is common. I don't really know how to phrase that, but if you're in Texas, you're in Oklahoma, you're in Georgia, North Carolina, buying these big tracts of land is relatively commonplace. Same like Wyoming probably. But if I'm trying to go in, I don't know, get a 20-acre lot here in San Diego, I think it's going to be a little trickier. I could be wrong. I've just found in these more rural land-focused markets, it's a bit easier. So getting lending on a deal in Texas seems a whole lot easier than doing it in California. Could be for a whole slew of reasons. That's just what I've seen, right? And so first off, you got to be in the right market, and then you got to be at the right price point. So I think a general rule of thumb, if it's your first time doing a deal with them, I don't know, maybe $200K, $250,000 and beyond is what they're going to want to see as a purchase price. I think it's a kind of a safe bet there. Now, I think as you start building a relationship, they know you, that you have a track record. Again, just like with private money, you can start getting away with a lot more. So I've heard people getting deals funded that were $100K, $150K, $200K, but it's usually not their first arrangement, right? So there's got to be enough scale in the deal to make it worth their while. They're simply not going to want to go lend on a $50,000 property. It's just not worth their time.
They're also going to need to see a pretty clear business plan, right? So if you just shoot them over a deal and you're just like, yeah, we're trying to fund this, like, no, it takes a little more work. So you need your personal finances in order. You're going to need a business plan. I think this stuff works best for value add deals, but I know plenty of people that have done deals that just have compressed margin, right? So a deal, I've cited this before, but there's a deal that was bought at 100 that was worth 170, but they put 25% down. So put 25K in the deal. So the cash on cash return is pretty crazy, right? You can use it in that route. That's not going to happen on your first deal with them because it's just so much paperwork to work through. So I think it's easier on your first deal to have it be a bigger value add deal because timelines are typically going to be longer on those. It's not as rushed and it's a bigger outcome. It makes it worth it, right? So bank financing, the rates that you're going to get are going to float all around. Typically, it's going to be like no payments for the first year, something along those lines. I don't know, 8%, 12% interest, something along those lines, usually 20, 25% down. So you're still going to need to come up with some money for the down payment. Now, you could use private money for that. Again, you can kind of put all these different capital stacks together to make this work. Now, the truth is, one of the things that I need to outline here is we're going through all these different funding options. The truth is, all of these are going to kind of like meet in the middle to make up your business. It's usually not just going to be one that carries the whole business. It's going to be a bit of hodgepodge of all of these to make things run seamlessly. You're pretty much, if you're doing things right in this business, you should be chronically running out of money. Like always, like they say, never, I think Grant Cardone says, never go out to dinner with a real estate investor because they have no money in their bank account, right? Because in this business, we're all about deploying as much capital as we possibly can. So usually it's going to be a hodgepodge. You're stacking all these things together to get all your deals funded. Okay, so this is where things start to get mega advanced. And at this point, I'm going to say you're a couple years into this business, 2, 3, 4 years in this business. Let me take a little swig of water here real quick, guys. All right. This is what we call fund creation or building a true fund, right? What we're doing here is we're turning land into a security, like a stock. And so when we do that, there's a lot more scrutiny and red tape that we have to go through. But once we are past that threshold, raising money is a lot easier, right? One thing that I forgot to mention here, and this should go without saying, I'm not an SEC attorney. I'm not your attorney. I'm not your financial advisor. Raising money has all sorts of do's and don'ts. So please, 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 please do your own due diligence. Simple things like going on social media and saying, hey, I'm looking for money. I can offer you 10% returns. Probably going to get you in trouble, right? So be careful. Do your own homework. There's a great book called How to Legally Raise Private Money. I recommend every real estate investor go and read that. It's a book with a really cheesy, like tropical cover on the page. So very important that we put that out there. But turning land into a security opens us up into a whole new world of what we can and can't do. One of the main things is by turning land into a security, you can go and raise this pool of money from multiple different investors, put it all into one pool, and you can use your own discretion on how it's used, essentially. There still has to be some business plan, but I could go and get 50 people's money, put it into a pool, and start just doing deals left and right without anyone's approval, without anyone's 2 cents, right? That might look a little bit like a promissory note arrangement with one person, but now we're doing it at scale with a lot of people put into a pool, right? And so this is like probably the only way to go and realistically scale and get millions of dollars in your land business. Unless you just know like Warren Buffett, it's going to be hard to find one investor who wants to go lend you $10 million on a promissory note. It's a lot easier to go get 100 people to lend and create a total of $10 million, right? Now, there's all sorts of different funds out there that you can create, right? There's some funds that are just geared toward accredited investors. So I believe there's $100,000 minimum that they can put into the fund. They can't put any lower than that. They have to have a net worth that's over $250,000. Those funds are usually have less scrutiny because think about it, it's a educated, savvy investor coming in, not just a Joe Blow off the street. There are some funds that are going to be accredited and not accredited, and there's going to have limits to how many you can have. There's some funds that are going to be to non-accredited investors where you can get like literally anyone in. It's like what Grant Cardone does, right? I heard this weird stat. I forget exactly what it was. Something along the lines of like the average amount put into these non-accredited funds is like a couple $100s per person. Like think about Fundrise and all these places. Like people just like throw a couple bucks in there to see what happens. That's cool because you could get millions of people giving you money, but there's just a lot more red tape, a lot more scrutiny that you're going to have to go through to get there. Okay. One of the cool things about creating funds too, there are some variations of funds where you can actually go and solicit online as well. So you'll see ads from Grant Cardone like, we can offer 10 to 12% returns and blah, 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 blah. So go and swipe up and give me money. You can't do that with any old fund, right? And so like there's obviously going to be a little more complexity there to get there. It's not impossible though. It's actually a lot easier than you may think. It's something that I've been spending a lot of time thinking through and working through, and I'll share more about that in the coming months. But it's not as difficult as I once thought. It's also not as expensive as I once thought. So a lot of people, that the kind of the bottleneck there has been, hey, it's like 20 grand, 25 grand. I've even heard quotes that's over 100 grand to register with the SEC, to draft all the documents. And if you're a small-time investor, that sounds really scary, right? Because that's just half the battle. Then you got to go and raise the money, and then blah, 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 blah. You have all these reporting standards. It's typically not something you're going to be able to do on your own. You're going to need some help to take this down. But the cool thing is I've been working through this process myself, and I've actually been able to get the cost down to set up a fund for accredited and non-accredited investors to $6,000 for everything, for filing, for setup, for documents, for everything, which is pretty crazy. If anyone is looking to set up a fund, you can send me an email and I'll help get you straightened out. Sumner@landinvestor.co. Again, just a good example is it pays to be thorough. It pays to do your own research, right? Just calling up and getting quotes from Joe Blow's, we were hearing stuff, 25K to 125K to do the same exact work, right? It's just a good reminder, it pays to be thorough. So that's the fund creation model. You're going to need a pretty big honking track record to make this work. And this is not for everyone. This is definitely not for when you first start. And it might not be for you really ever, right? You can run a very successful multiple seven-figure business without ever raising a fund. I don't want to mislead you in thinking that this is the stair-stepping pattern that you have to take to be successful. Again, you could make 7 figures a year just with public JV. The problem with that is you're going to be shelling out hundreds of thousands of dollars that otherwise could be going to you. And so I think for most people, at least getting to that hard money finish line is going to make the most sense. But it's really not that difficult. Okay. The last one is what I call Fund and Grow. It's a platform that we've been using myself and a lot of Leah members. This is like this is not meant to be like the end all be all. This is the only funding option you use. But we've been able to open up about 30 to a quarter million, 30,000 to a quarter million or so for funding our deals. And you can use this to fund however you like. I'll share a link inside the chat for you guys. You can use this to fund however you'd like in the business. It could be for mailers. It could be for deals. What's cool though is you literally pay 2.9%. So you get these 0% interest business cards. They open them up. They go and negotiate the highest limits. They do all that work for you. And then you use a company called Plastique to go and wire that money into escrow to close on your deals. Or you can always just swipe it online if you needed to. So yeah, that's a cool way to kind of fill in the gaps. You also get credit card points on that. So again, you could use that for capital stack. You could use that for payroll. Use that for funding your deals. I think funding your deals makes the most sense. I think the method that it really makes sense is using it to fund transactional funding for double closes. So if I need 30 grand in a pinch, I can just wire that out at 2.9%. I'm paying a little bit more than I would from like a standard transactional funder, but I get credit card points on it. I build up my business credit. It's cool. Business credit is not linked to your personal credit either. So heaven forbid something terrible happens, you're a little more safe there, right? It's a no-brainer to add to your business. I think the rate we were able to negotiate, I could be wrong. I think it's 5,000 standard. I think we got it for 3,500 for Leah members, which is a pretty cool deal. One of the things they'll let you do is you can actually split it with 2 people. So if you want to find a friend, another Leah member, someone to go in on it, you guys can split that cost, but you'll still kind of get your own account and credit cards and all that stuff. It's like, we're talking about spending $1,500 or $2,000, whatever it may be, to get this set up. And you can fund hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in it because you can turn that capital over and over again. Usually the most you can get is about $250,000 with them. And it's an ongoing recurring service. So it's not like it's a one-time thing. Every year they go and open these new 0% credit cards for you. So in perpetuity, you can keep this really, really cheap money in your business. Okay, we're going to go rapid fire here. And I need to do so because we are running up on time. I'm going to tell you guys how to go and find private lenders. Okay, I'm just going to go. Most of the stuff is going to be pretty logical, so you guys can kind of decipher. Friends, family, obviously. Facebook groups, obviously. Real estate Facebook groups, land Facebook groups, just get in Facebook groups. There's people with money in there who don't have opportunities, right? Even inside the Leah Discord, there are so many people who want to invest in land, but they have more money than time, and they don't know how to get involved. And I get hit up by these people all the time. Yo, I want to do this, but I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. Could I fund your deals? People are out there in excess. So Facebook groups, like I said, other investors. So people like me, I fund deals all the time. And so what's cool about that is like, you might not get the cheapest rate ever, right? Because the problem with that is there's an opportunity cost conundrum. I'm not going to give you 90-10 money. I could go and just fund my own deal. Like, it's got to be like, it's got to make sense. But you get vetted opinion. So you get like kind of the expert guidance. You get essentially one-on-one coaching, if you will, or borderline shadowing. And then you can also integrate into their resources. Like we'll dispo deals for people, kind of run them through our whole system so they can go back out there and just go focus on finding more deals. So it's kind of a cool option. Could be me, could be other people, but like there are other investors that have been doing this for a while, typically have money, they have experience, they could be a resource in that sense. It's not always going to be the cheapest, but you're going to pay for you're going to pay for like the additional value. So for example, I get a lot of deals sent to me that are like kind of weird. They're like, yo, this deal, like it needs like this weird easement and then this neighbor and then this. And I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, I've done that before. We can figure this out. Bam. Stuff like that. Social media. So be careful, right? What you say out there, but just sharing what you're doing, talking about what you're doing, never soliciting for investors, but just talking about what you're doing. You'll get people that float into your orbit every week. I get a few messages from people. Yo, love what you're doing. I wish I could do it myself. I just can't. I make too much money elsewhere. I've got too many other things going on. Can I give you money to get involved, right? People love hearing about this model. It's sexy. It's cool. It's bizarre. It's unlike anything they've ever heard of. A lot of people, when you talk about this, they want to join, but they have other obligations. So it's like, I got more money than time. Let me give you some money. RIA meetups. You go to a RIA meetup, you'll be the cat's claw, whatever the hell the term is. You'll be the cool one there, right? Because everyone's doing wholesaling, fix and flip, buy and hold, burr model. You're like the one person there. It's like, yeah, I flip dirt, and these are our returns, and they're bananas. You want some? People are gonna be like, oh my god, I'm making like 10% cash on cash. This is crazy. So yes, people will want to get involved in that. Here's a ninja one: sellers, past sale, right? You do a big ass deal with someone, boom, you give them 300K, 200K, 100K, 50K, whatever it may be. What are you going to do with that money? Because I got these other deals, these other opportunities where we could compound that money and you could lend it out at 10%, 12%, whatever it may be. They just had a windfall of cash and you have some trust with them because they just did a deal with you and sold you their asset. Those can be good people to hit up. Dennis has shared a cool story about how I forget what it was. I don't know, used some ridiculous amount of money from some seller over and over and over, like millions of dollars from one person, like over and over and over and over again. Regional banks, think small, local, regional banks in podunk areas, right? Those are going to be your best friend for getting bank financing. Masterminding communities. So joining paid masterminds, coaching programs. Like there's people with money in there. There's usually people that understand the model. So there's a lot of money floating around there. And then entrepreneurs, right? I love finding money that's 1 degree adjacent, right? So if I go and find money from another land investor, I only want to do that if they have a skill that I'm missing, right? So if they can fill a gap for me, like if I didn't know how to do a subdivide deal, it's like, cool, I'll go get land investor money. I know I'll pay a little more, but I'm going to get way more value in return from their insight. But if I'm just looking for the cheapest money, I like finding entrepreneurs because I know they have a vehicle to make money, typically have more money than time. They typically are cool with a little bit of risk. They typically can understand how this business works because it's just simply an arbitrage business. It's not rocket science. Those have been our best people to find lending with, right? Entrepreneurs. So however you want to go find entrepreneurs, go find them. Ideally successful entrepreneurs, not people that say they're entrepreneurs. So yeah, here's the takeaways, guys. Start before you need it, okay? Don't be like, holy shit, I have all these pending deals. I don't know how to fund. Start now. The work starts now. Go and start networking, getting your face out there, talking to people, sharing with people what you're doing. Start building your track record. Start documenting your freaking KPIs. If you don't, I'm going to come across the screen and hit you over the head. Document this stuff. Track all of it meticulously because that is how you're going to go and raise money. If you have shitty KPIs, I think we buy our deals for like 20 and like sell them for 40 on average. People are going to be like, no, what do you literally sell them for? Like, show me everything. So track all KPIs, build case studies, and finally create a pitch deck. If you guys don't know what a pitch deck is, it originated in Silicon Valley. It's how people raise money for venture capital. That's how people use it for funds, though. And like everyone does it across the board. And even if you're just raising piddly squat little private joint venture money, still have a pitch deck. It shows a level of professionalism. And it's a really cool way to give an elevator pitch on what we do. If you can't explain it in 30 seconds, people will just will just kind of turn off, right? And this can be a hard business to explain, especially when we're passionate about it. We start rambling. So put it in a pitch deck, just a little PowerPoint, make it pretty. You can pay someone to make it nice for you online. There's many, many pitch deck examples that you guys can go look it out there. All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Ari, I'll look at your one question, then I have to hop out of here. Ari says, is there any reason why you wouldn't want to work with an individual or funder in general? Or do you feel that as long as on paper, the agreement's all, it's all good? Yeah, I think it's all good. I mean, of course, there's got to be some level of mutual trust there. If I think that they're not trustworthy, I probably would never even be in their orbit to begin with. But no, there's no reason I wouldn't. I think it's like as long as they're trustworthy, that's it. It's all trust, man. It's all trust. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. In the chat, I just shared a webinar that I've been talking about for a long time. If you guys want to go check it out, you guys can. Also today at 10 a.m., which is coming up in 15 minutes, we release our free program on market selections or market selection masterclass. Everyone that's on our email list, you guys will get the link for free. It's a pay what you want. You can pay $0, $1, $100, $1,000, whatever you want. I really don't care. Pretty cool. We just did it to be cute and funny. Anyways, guys, see ya. Have a great day. Bye.